great from here, John.
Thank you. Oops, good.
Thanks ever so much, Ian, and can I start by thanking everybody for that fantastic show of solidarity. Wherever we go around the country, we're getting labour movement events to do their poster about reinstating candy, and I can tell you from visiting the strikers and the picket line very regularly, it really does help boost their morale and lift their spirits. So I do want to thank everybody for that marvellous gesture. I also wanted to start by saying that it's a fantastic honour and a privilege for me to come and address this conference. You see, I think your union shows us all that is best about trade unionism in Britain, and actually shows it doesn't matter about being one of those massive unions. What matters, if you're a union that believes in fighting back, defending your members, standing up to a bullying employer, you're prepared to get stuck in, that is what trade unionism is all about. And in your union, the lead you're taking around fast food rights, around getting the TUC to adopt the £10 an hour policy, which, by the way, they need to start getting on and doing something about. The fact that you're campaigning over issues like maximum temperatures in the workplace, and probably most significantly, for me anyway, was the marvellous victory that your members won against Hovis and a strike against 0 hours contracts. Because I tell you what happens when you see an inspiring story like that. It doesn't matter how awful it is in work, it doesn't matter how shit you feel, it doesn't matter how much you think the employer or the government is getting on your back. You see other working men and women standing up for justice and winning, and it absolutely lifts your morale and makes you realise what is possible. So what I think is this, is if you can win in Hovis, if we can win in some of our disputes, just imagine what we could win if the trade union movement came together and all of us started to take action jointly with one another. Because I have no doubt that if we did that, we could see off what's actually happening. Do you know, I started work in a civil service, in a DHSS office, a benefit office, when I was 16 in 1980. I had 5 O-levels, and you had to have 5 O-levels to get in the civil service, so I just scraped in. And on my first day at work, my mother, and of course you always listen to your mother, you do in South Wales anyway, I know it's different in Crosby, but in South Wales you listen to your mother. And she said to me as I was leaving the door, after she put me tie up and brushed down my velvet jacket, and she said to me, son, she said, you're going to work for the civil service. Fantastic pay, fantastic pension, job for life, and people in the community will look up to you with admiration for what you do. Now, finding out that my mother lied 4 times in one sentence, right, is a cross that I've had to bear ever since. Because it's never been good pay, it's never been a job for life, but it did used to be a job where you could do knowing that you were there to help people back into work, help people when they fell upon hard times, help the disabled, the lone parents, the pensioners, because when I worked there, your job was to ensure that you did whatever you could to help people. You fast forward that 30 years, and what's happening in the DWP is a bit of a microcosm of what is happening with the Tory government across the board, right? 6 years of pay freezes. We've seen in the civil service 196,000 jobs cut in the last 7 years. The government say they're about to cut another 100,000 in this parliament. In the DWP, we had members who used to be there to help people who are now bullied and threatened with the sack if they don't apply benefit sanctions to people who are desperate to try and get money who live in poverty on the most spurious grounds whatsoever. They have turned one of our public services into one where most people who come in now are suspicious of the workers across the desk because the government is trying to use it to force people into abject poverty. And our message has to be this. What we have to do in the DWP as a union is stand up for those workers that we organise, but carry on with the work we're doing with groups like Disabled People Against the Cuts, the Unemployed Workers Centres, to stand outside making it clear we abhor the policy of benefit sanctions in order to say that if we can unite claimants, and the workers inside, then we have a powerful force that can stop the government. However, if we let them divide us, if we let one have a go at the other, it's what they want, like they tried to divide private sector against public sector, those people who are in work against out of work, those people who are migrants and those people who are not. All of their strategy is based on dividing people as much as you can in order to drive through their terrible attacks. And that's why I stand at this conference, and I'll put my cards on the table. I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but I stand here at your conference knowing that you'll be having the debates that we had at ours 2 weeks ago. We were the first union in Britain to meet after the general election. Now, I don't know what you did on May the 7th, but I sat at home with a curry. It wasn't from Greg's, I'm sorry, but it was a curry. And we sat there, my wife, my kids, listening to the telly, hoping that at 10 o'clock, what we would have seen is that this government was going to be removed from office. And when the exit poll came through to say the Tories had a majority, I think I, like most people, if not everyone here, was absolutely gutted. There's something interesting about why I personally felt gutted. I wasn't gutted about who had lost, because I have to say this, that the fact that Labour lost because they were so timid, they were such an awful opposition, they didn't really give anyone inspiration or hope, they actually tried to play it safe, wasn't the tragedy of the election. The tragedy of the election was that the Tories won. And the Tories won, and they are now going to attack people in this country in a way that we will have not seen for generations. And that means that us in the trade union movement, I think, have to seize a moment to say this, that if we wait for Labour either to win in 2020 or deliver us from what we are about to face, we will be well and truly stuffed. If on the other hand we recognise this, that the trade union movement, 6.5 million strong still, coming together, can fight for justice at work, decent pay rises, decent welfare state, decent NHS, then we have the ability to stop this government in its tracks. Incidentally, if we do that, it might mean that some of the political parties, including Labour, will start turning to the left rather than turning to the right. And my union, and I hope like yours therefore, is absolutely committed to work together at every level to ensure we can defend ourselves now, but also that we can have a better form of politics than you currently have in this country. And what I really wanted to do in my short speech is to talk therefore about the things we need to fight now, but also what my union believes we need to do politically to ensure that we do not go into another election faced with parties that represent austerity or austerity light. In other words, a party that's going to knock you over the head, or a party that is going to come up to you silently and still inflict pain, but maybe not in such an upfront way. That's no choice for us and for our kids. We should aspire to have a real choice of a socialist society that is based on people getting what they need, based on what they need rather than profits and rather than big business. And therefore, for me, we stand here facing a Queen's speech that we've just had that was going to unleash the biggest wave of cuts that we will have seen in this country. It's going to be very clear very quickly that what we had in the last government was just a warm-up for what we're about to get. Let's give you some of the lowlights. In education, this government is just about to introduce testing in schools of 4-year-old children. Now, can you imagine anything more obscene than 4-year-old children being tested in school? Not only is that obscene for the kids, it's also obscene for the teachers, who from the earliest age are drilled to ensure that people pass tests rather than learn about life, and if they don't pass the test, they're now told that their schools will be forced to become academies and privatised into corporations across the education system. On social security, we have, contrary to what you might read if you ever pick up a copy of the Daily Mail, I'm sure you don't, but if you did, do you know we have one of the least generous benefit systems in the whole of Europe. Compare our benefit levels to France, to Germany, and to Sweden. They are absolutely miles less generous. And yet we're told that the trouble with this country is there's too many people who can while away their time on benefits. But you know what? The government hasn't just driven down benefit levels. It actually is about to carry out £12 billion worth of cuts on social security. And these will be cuts to people of working age. And it won't just be to people who are unemployed and disabled, but they will also be, my bet is, to many thousands of your members who will be receiving working tax credits because of low wages for many of the employers, they are going to introduce benefit freezes for working tax credits under the new universal credit. In other words, what we're going to see is in-work poverty get even worse. But do you know what else they're going to introduce? They're going to introduce a sanctions regime against those people who are in work. We will have the spectacle in my union where 40% of our members are entitled to working tax credits because their pay is so low. The people in job centres will have to threaten their colleagues with sanctions. If you are part-time, if you work in the industry and you're part-time or you turn down overtime, you may well be sanctioned on your benefits if you are not being deemed to do enough to get extra work. In other words, what the government's about to do is not just pick on the unemployed, they're going to absolutely turn on all working class people and families who are dependent on benefits in work or out of work in order to make ends meet. And we've got to do something about it, because there's already 1 million people on food banks. Think what it's going to be like if tax credits are sanctioned or if benefits are cut by £12 billion. I'm sure your conference has discussed, but we know there's going to be changes in the union laws. It will now be illegal to have a strike unless 50% of members vote and 40% of those vote in favour. The government know that across the public sector, of the last 119 industrial action ballots, 101 would not have passed those thresholds. In other words, they're going to make it virtually or as difficult as they can to strike at a time when we will need to strike more than ever before. So the change to the anti-union laws will affect you, it will affect us, and we need a campaign against it. Do you know, we also need a massive campaign against privatisation. Because again, I don't think we've seen anything yet in terms of the privatisation that is coming our way. In the civil service, we're expecting privatisation of tax offices, of benefit offices, and of debt collection services working for the Ministry of Justice. There will be no end to where the privateers will pop up to make profits on the back of our members. They will do nothing about the housing crisis, nothing about the health crisis, and nothing about the environment crisis. In fact, they will make all these things worse. So that, it seems to me, in a nutshell, tells us how much we have got to face. And I think that means, comrades, that we've got to ask ourselves over the last 5 years, did we do well enough with the last government? Now, with exceptions like your fantastic Hovis strikers, my union believes that the union movement failed. We failed to put up enough opposition to what the government did. And if we repeat that failure in this Parliament, then we will regret it for generations to come. Things are literally at that stage where it is, as somebody said, stand up and fight or we're going to be run over. Now, as somebody in Unite once said at a meeting, to win a fight, you've got to be in one. So it seems to me that our call at your conference and mine should be to the TUC leaders across the board: why don't we all get in this fight together and stand up against this government and what they're going to do? Now, you've had some marvellous disputes. I know you've talked about the National Gallery strike, but I just want to say this about the strike of the National Gallery. Because the National Gallery workers are PCS members. They're low paid, and the National Gallery want to privatise 400 out of the 600 jobs. Our members have had 34 days of strike action. There's another day of strike action this Thursday, and then we are considering escalating that action even further. Not because we want to, but because the management are ploughing ahead with their plans to privatise the second most popular tourist attraction in the UK. In addition to that, they sacked our leading steward, the person who was leading our ACAS delegation, sacked on the eve of the first strike to send terror through the workforce. They calculated that if we can sack your senior steward, you haven't got a chance. I have to say that nothing made me prouder in my union than the response of our members to the sacking of Candy Unwin was to have the longest series of strikes we have had so far in this campaign. So I want to thank Ronnie and Ian and others from your union who've been on the picket line, who have had their sessions on the loud hailer, who have been sending solidarity from you and from your colleagues across the UK. And our commitment as a union is to say we're going to do whatever it takes to win that strike. No matter how long it takes, we will be there supporting the members and seeking to build that campaign, because we believe if we can stop privatisation at the National Gallery, it will do what your Hovis strike did. It will inspire people. in small workplaces and large, to actually believe that you can win if you're brave enough to stand up and be counted. And that's why when I do meetings in my union, I tell this little story, because I think it's a story that really gives most people some heart, because it shows you can win. PCS represents people working in Windsor Castle. Now, for those who don't know, Windsor Castle is where the Queen lives when she's not sat on her throne. Our members were not paid the London living wage, and they have been expected for the last 4 years to work on a voluntary basis and do extra work without any pay whatsoever. Now, these are not members who are the most militant in the trade union movement. There's never been a strike before at Windsor Castle. But this year, they said to us, we've had enough. We've had enough of being exploited, we've had enough of low pay, and we've had enough of being expected to work for nothing. So they asked us to ballot them. We balloted them for industrial action. 91% of people voted in favour of strike. And you know what? They didn't take 1 minute of strike action. They got the London living wage backdated 6 months and pay rises between 4.5% and 7.5%. Now, I tell you what, if you can win in the Queen's House, you can win at the National Gallery, you can win at Greg's, and you can win everywhere that bosses try to exploit us, whoever they are, by basic trade union principles. And that's what the story at Windsor Castle tells me, and that is why we're determined to ensure we can repeat that success in the National Gallery. And therefore I hope that everyone here will not only continue to support us, but will consider coming on the massive demonstration on the 20th of June, called by the People's Assembly in London, where over 100,000 people are expected to march against austerity. We want union banners at it. We want people across the public and private sector making common cause to say to the Tories, we are not going to sit back and let it happen. And it is my opinion that if we see an uprising of resistance on small local disputes and larger national ones, then we can continue to see the tide turn as we saw at Windsor Castle. But it's equally true to say, if we put our heads down, if we decide not now, if we decide we're not strong enough to win, then it will be every man and every woman for themselves. And God help us is all I can say. Because if we put our head down, we will suffer, and our children will suffer, and we cannot, and we will not allow that to happen. So I want to finish really by saying, where does that fit into the political situation? Because in the next few months, I think our job is clear. It is to support people, it is to stand up and be counted, to work together at the General Council, to work together in our towns and in our cities, to support ourselves whenever we have to campaign. It's to build those campaigns. That's quite easy. The much tougher thing is, what do we think we need to do politically? What are we going to do that mean we do not face the same type of choice we had in 2020, where most people are already saying, in the Labour Party, by the way, that they don't think they're going to win in 2020, and some on the right of the Labour Party are actually saying it is now about 2025. Well, if you think about that for a minute, that is 10 more years of the type of things that we're going to be fighting in the here and now. I mean, it's no wonder that people didn't come out to vote and stayed at home. If all we can say is we're aiming now for 2025, then we really have got a problem. And therefore, I think it is up to our movement, whether it's unions like yours that are affiliated to the Labour Party, or unions like mine that aren't, to join together to say the people in Britain deserve a better politics than what we've got at the moment. The people actually deserve a far better choice than basically the Tories and Labour, who, whilst they are different, agree on so many things. Agree on privatisation, agree on public sector pay caps, for example, agree on benefit caps, agree that the problem we have with welfare is there are too many people claiming benefits. They shouldn't be agreeing on those things. Labour should be saying the Tories are wrong, 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 and wrong again. And if they did that, then maybe some of the 27% who didn't bother to vote, or 30%, might have thought there was something to worth voting for. And if Labour hadn't been sitting back thinking, well, at the end of the day, working class people, they have to vote for us because there isn't any other alternative, that taking our people for granted, that they saw come back and bite them in the most vicious way. Because people either stayed at home, or far too often, 3.9 million of them, decided often to vote UKIP. Now, if we have working class people voting UKIP because they think they offer something better than Labour, the trade union movement needs to stand up and start arguing for real left politics so that working class people got somewhere to turn. So, comrades, our union believes, and we've met with John McDonnell earlier this week, that wherever you've stood in the past, in the Labour Party or not out of the Labour Party, our job has to be to unite all those people on the left of politics, to make common cause, to fight the government now, and to argue for the type of changes that can see us have a better political choice in the future. Now, we believe, John believes, my union believes, therefore, that now is the time for the Labour movement to say we will campaign absolutely flat out for proportional representation. And I tell you why John and I and others, and I know you've got Arthur Scargill speaking later, who wrote the most fantastic article as long back ago as 1987, arguing that socialists should agree to electoral reform because that is the best way that we can mobilise the left. Now, why do I say that here today, and why do I think it's important? I think it's important for these reasons. If we don't reform the electoral system, the elections will continue to be about 100 marginal seats, meaning all the political parties will move to the centre in order to win over the so-called Middle England vote. There'd be nothing being said for working class people in communities like ours who need something better. It means we will carry on having a situation where we're going to have the most right-wing government in this country for decades, elected by 24% of the electorate. How can it be right that less than 1 in 4 voted for this government, yet they're going to carry out the biggest attack on us that we will have seen since the Thatcher period? So it's not fair, it's not right, it's not democratic, but the main reason that people like John and I think now is the time to move is this. It is probably through the advent of PR that we really could see the left in this country, in the Labour Party and outside, make common cause to offer people socialism at elections, not just this same-ish centrist politics that forgets the working class people of this country who need so much more. And my finishing point really is this. For those who are not convinced, have a look across every single country in Europe where you see real left parties, the ones who will support the policies that this conference will agree this week, whether it's in Greece, whether it's in France, whether it's in Spain or whether it's in Germany, they get votes by the million. And they get votes by the million, not for some wishy-washy in the centre, we're all fighting over some tiny voters in the marginals. They get votes in the millions. For nationalisation, for no to austerity, for trade union rights, for strong welfare states, and for a society that believes the wealth is created by working people, so why can't working people share that wealth rather than it all be exploited by those people at the top? So I believe that if it's good enough for those countries, it should be good enough for here. And if we can mount a Labour movement campaign that fights austerity now, but also seeks to change the electoral system, maybe the next time there's an election, we can all enthusiastically vote for left-wing policies, knowing it will make a difference. Comrades, if we don't do that, the danger is we'll have the fight now, but in 2020 we will have a Labour Party going into the election led by either Andy Burnham, Liz Kendall, Mary Cray or Yvette Cooper that believe the trade unions are an embarrassment, that don't want to take their money, that don't want to stand up for trade union rights, and that is an absolute dead end for the people that I and you represent. Do you know, I want better than that. I believe my kids deserve better than that, and I believe all you and your members deserve better than that. So let's fight in the here and now against this vicious government, but let's fight to transform politics to have a real left-wing voice in Britain, made up of Labour Party members and others, to say we want a better society, and we will fight for it like never before. Thanks very much for your time.